The question now is that the amendment be agreed to. The member for Petrie.
Well, thanks, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Marriage Amendment Definition and Religious Freedoms Bill 2017. And I want to start by congratulating a few people that have been able to get this bill to where it is. Particularly, I want to acknowledge Liberal National Party members from Queensland, Warren Ench, the member for Leichhardt and Trevor Evans, the member for Brisbane, who have been wanting to see this change, and I do congratulate on them as fellow members of the Liberal National Party. I also want to congratulate the Yes campaign on the win, with 61% of Australians voting in support of the question, and congratulations on being able to achieve that. And I want to congratulate the No campaign, the Coalition for Marriage, the Australian Christian Lobby, being able to stand up and represent the views of the almost 40% of people that said no. Mr Deputy Speaker, my personal position on same-sex marriage, I was very clear with what I told people prior to the 2016 election, and that is that I believe marriage is between a man and a woman for heterosexual relationships only. I believed that same-sex couples, in Queensland at least, already had the same rights through civil unions in Queensland, and that was a position that I took to the last election, and to every same-sex couple that asked me directly what my thoughts were on it, I was straight with them and gave them a completely straight answer face to face. The plebiscite obviously has been held, and I do want to congratulate the Prime Minister on sticking to his word of taking to the last election, giving the people of Australia a say on this matter. And he needs to be congratulated, and we know that this will become law by the end of the week. Same-sex couples will be able to marry in 2018 after applying for a marriage licence. After the Governor-General signs it off, 28 days later, they'll be able to marry. And the Prime Minister needs to be congratulated. He was a supporter of same-sex marriage, but he stuck to our election commitment to give all Australians a say. And I think that was really important and one of the only ways to get a result in this issue, given that the Parliament here has had this debate many times before. Most recently in 2012, was the last time that this question was asked, when Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister and the Labor Party were in power, and it was defeated. No came across. In fact, the previous member for Petrie, now the state member for Redcliffe, voted no, clearly no, and was part of the reason why it didn't go forward. And every step of the way, the members opposite, the Labor Party, have fought to make sure that the Australian people didn't get a say. Why? Not exactly sure. Probably because they did not trust the Australian people to say yes, and they feared failure in relation to that. And so this is a big win for the Prime Minister and for the government. I actually think, but Mr Deputy Speaker, that it's a win for same-sex couples in having the actual plebiscite as well, because what it says to them is that most Australians agree and want to see the bill go forward, which is important. And so I actually think I disagree with the member for Adelaide and the member for Jagga Jagga that says there's still more to do, because in many ways people said that this was the last remaining piece of equality that needed to go through. And when I'm out in my community talking to people, people are very respectful of many people. And the whole plebiscite debate in my area was overall conducted very well. But I think that it does send a strong message to same-sex couples that, yep, the Australian people have had a say, they voted for yes, the bill will go through by the end of the week, and we go from there. Mr Deputy Speaker, in relation to the bill itself, I don't really think that it provides the protections for everyone in the community. I think there is a little bit of criticism of this bill, outside of the fact that it provides protections for priests and pastors and those religious people that will actually marry same-sex couples. Outside of that, and outside church buildings, there's a whole lot of protections that are not mentioned in this bill, which could be. And shame on the Labor Party for not voting on the amendments in the last week's Senate and stifling debate and not having a free vote there again, ignoring the genuine concerns of many people. Because the fact is this week we could do both. We could legalise same-sex marriage, and we could also make sure that those protections are put in. And Mr Deputy Speaker, if you look at the front page of the Australian today, one of the articles on there, it said schools warn the PM on gay marriage, and it says Simon Benson, the head of one of the country's most prestigious private schools, located in Malcolm Turnbull's electorate, has warned that unless the Prime Minister secures amendments to the same-sex marriage bill, or the Parliament does, to protect faith-based schools, they could be at risk of being defunded or even deregistered. Now, the fact is there's a lot of people that fear that, and I fear that for schools in my own electorate, like Muir College in Rothwell, like Grace Lutheran Primary School at Clontarf, like Grace Lutheran High School in Clontarf and Christ the King at Deception Bay, because the fact is that Catholic and Protestant schools teach that marriage is between a man and a woman. So what does that mean? At the moment they're receiving government funding, does that mean that down the track, say within the next 10 years in 2028, that they will no longer be able to receive government funding because they teach a traditional view of marriage? It's a genuine concern for people, and the Parliament could clear it up this week and not skimp on it. I acknowledge the will of the Australian people is to introduce into legislation a change to the Marriage Act to allow same-sex couples to marry, and I support that. I said I would listen and represent the views of my electorate, and I'm doing that. Even though my own personal opinion was for traditional marriage, I will not be standing in the way. I also acknowledge that nearly 40% of Australia voted no, and many of those who voted yes did not vote to relinquish their parental rights to decide the moral education of their children, nor did they vote to reduce their freedom of belief, freedom of speech and association. As Senator Abetz outlined last week, 62% of Australians believe Parliament should guarantee in law for freedom of conscience, belief and religion if it legislates for same-sex marriage. So they want same-sex marriage and they want these freedoms protected. The bill does not provide such protections, in my opinion. The Australian people were assured that religious freedom is fundamental and it will be protected in any bill that emerges from this Parliament. The Senate Committee inquiry into the status of human right to freedom of religion or belief said that overall the evidence supports the need for current protections for religious freedom to be enhanced. However, basic protections for parental rights and freedom of religion were rejected by the Senate last week. What confidence can I give to the constituents of my electorate and the nearly 70% of Australians who hold some form of religion, according to the 2016 census, that any recommendations from the Ruddock Review will be supported by the upper house? I don't want to say I hope they will be supported. They should be supported. And unfortunately, as acknowledged by submissions to the Senate Committee, Australian law, in contrast to the strong and clear protections for religious freedom under international law, Article 18 of the ICCPR, provided weak and inadequate protection for freedom of religion and belief. International experience clearly demonstrates the consequences for Australia if we do not provide adequate protections for fundamental freedoms. The legislation for change as it stands provides minimal to the point of being non-existent protections for freedom of religion and conscience for a significant proportion of our citizens. Will parents, foster carers, schools, charities have their strongly held, and individuals have their strongly held beliefs protected, or will we, in attempting to fast-track legislation before Christmas, impose no religion as the state religion on our pluralistic, tolerant society, driving religion and conscience from the public square through the threat of anti-discrimination laws? The inevitable intolerance and discrimination in the name of tolerance is disturbing. Here, right now, this week, the Parliament has an opportunity to represent all Australians, to bring about the change to the Marriage Act to include same-sex couples, 100%, while also protecting the freedom of conscience and belief of a vast many Australians. And Mr Deputy Speaker, there's been a lot of people in my electorate contact me in relation to making sure that those freedoms are protected. Here I have an email from Christine in North Lakes, and she said, if you cannot stop this bill, and we don't want to stop the bill, we want it to go through and honour the plebiscite, which it will this week, as promised, despite the naysayers on the other side in the Labor Party. But she says, if you cannot stop this bill, please do what you can to support amendments to this bill that include freedoms for those who do not agree with this bill. Mr Deputy Speaker, I also had an email from Alana, a grandmother in Deception Bay, and she says, as a no voter, I'm very concerned about the rush to push through same-sex marriage into law in its current form in this bill. There are totally inadequate safeguards for freedom of speech and protection of each person's right to defend their beliefs and way of life. An email from Marty Harnish from Redcliffe, and he says, hi Luke, please represent us in protecting religious freedoms, freedom of speech, the right of children to innocence in the wake of the postal survey results. I am so concerned about the sexualisation of children and exposing them to confusion with the Safe Schools curriculum. Come on, little ones can't make decisions on these things. Please protect the church and the church's schools so they can be pillars of society. I know they are. And the member for Hotham the other day, when she spoke on this, said that number one feedback from people of concern was in relation to safe schools. Down in Bald Hills, in the southern part of my electorate, dear Luke, I'm a Bald Hills resident, and with this battle now lost, he was obviously a no voter, and the bill to be presented to Parliament, I am absolutely fuming that religious protections promised at the outset have been dumped by the Senate. This was written last week. This is a pathway to inevitable safe schools, with parents having no say into this indoctrination by withdrawing their children facing the weight of the law. I say to the Parliament and to you, Mr Deputy Speaker, that there is genuine concern in relation to the bill, and there is absolutely no reason why same-sex marriage cannot be passed this week, and also ensure that those religious protections, to make sure that the country that we have, the freedom that we have to express our faith and our views will remain. And once again, I condemn the Labor Party for ensuring that they do not have a conscience vote on this matter, that they in bloc, and after everything that they'd done to make sure the Australian people did not have a say on this matter as well. Because the fact is the government had a mandate after the 2016 election to make sure that we gave the Australian people a say. We did. They voted yes. Marriage equality will be law by the end of the week, and I will not be standing in the way. But at the same time, I make the most strongest argument to the Parliament that we need to make sure that religious protection is upheld, and I'll leave it with the Parliament. Thank you.